She was the nurse. Everyone ignored the one who quietly emptied bedpans and never spoke of her past. But when a military-grade black helicopter touched down in the hospital parking lot and heavily armed men stormed the emergency room, they weren't looking for a fugitive. They were looking for her. Mercy General Hospital in Billings, Montana was the kind of place where ambition went to die and routine reigned supreme. It was a sterile, fluorescent-lit purgatory of sprained ankles, seasonal influenza, and the occasional bar fight gone wrong. In the heart of this unexceptional chaos worked Hannah Mercer. To the rest of the staff, Hannah was nothing more than a fixture of the night shift, as dependable and easily overlooked as the hum of the vending machine in the break room. She was 34, with pale, unremarkable features, her brown hair perpetually tied in a tight, sensible bun. She spoke softly, walked with a quiet grace that didn't disturb the air around her, and possessed an uncanny ability to disappear into the background. When the charge nurses needed someone to handle a difficult, combative patient, they sent Hannah. When a double shift needed covering on a holiday, Hannah's name mysteriously appeared on the roster. She never complained. She never gossiped. She simply existed, a ghost in faded blue scrubs. Her colleague Beatrice Miller, a veteran nurse with a penchant for loud complaints and bitter coffee, often mistook Hannah's silence for simple-mindedness. "You let them walk all over you, honey," Beatrice would drawl, leaning heavily against the nurse's station, while Hannah methodically charted vitals. "Dr. Aris spoke to you like a dog just now, and you just nodded. You've got to grow a spine." Hannah would offer a faint, polite smile, her eyes remaining perfectly blank. "He's under a lot of pressure, Beatrice. It's fine." What Beatrice didn't know, what none of them could possibly comprehend, was that Hannah Mercer did not lack a spine. She was merely exercising an ironclad discipline forged in fires far hotter than a busy Tuesday night in a county emergency room. Hannah preferred the invisibility. Being ignored meant she wasn't being scrutinized. And for the past 5 years, avoiding scrutiny was the only thing keeping her alive. The facade cracked just for a millimeter on a rain-slicked Thursday at 2 a.m. The double doors of the ER burst open and paramedics wheeled in a chaotic mess of a multi-car collision. The quiet humming of the hospital shattered into a cacophony of shouting voices, ringing alarms, and the sharp scent of copper and antiseptic. Dr. Philip Aris, the attending physician whose ego vastly outmatched his competence, was immediately overwhelmed. "I need a chest tube set up in Bay 3. Aris barked, his voice pitching higher with panic as he stared at a young man whose chest was violently expanding on only one side. "He's tensioning. Where's respiratory?" "Respiratory is 5 minutes out, doctor," Beatrice yelled over the din. Aris froze the needle hovering uselessly in his trembling hand. The patient's oxygen saturation monitor began a high-pitched, frantic shrieking. Without a word, Hannah stepped out of the shadows. Her movements changed. The meek, hunched posture vanished, replaced by a terrifying liquid efficiency. She smoothly nudged Dr. Aris aside, a movement so subtle he later couldn't remember how she got the needle from him. In one fluid motion, she palpated the second intercostal space, inserted the large bore needle with surgical precision, and released the trapped air. The hiss of escaping pressure was audible over the alarms. The patient's monitors instantly stabilized. Before Aris could even process what had happened, Hannah was already gone, melting back into the periphery, returning to her station to restock gauze. When the trauma surgeon finally arrived, Aris eagerly took the credit for the life-saving decompression. Hannah simply watched from the corner, her face a mask of mild, vacant interest. But the night was not over. At 3:45 a.m., long after the collision victims had been stabilized and transferred to the ICU, a separate unmarked ambulance screeched to a halt outside the bay doors. There were no sirens, no radio warnings to the front desk. Two men in dark civilian clothing hauled a stretcher through the automatic doors. On it lay a massive, heavily muscled man, unconscious, and bleeding profusely from multiple gunshot wounds to the abdomen. Gunshot victim found him on the highway. One of the men grunted to Beatrice, dumping the stretcher in the hallway before turning to leave. "Wait, we need your names. Police need to be notified," Beatrice protested, but the men were already out the doors, vanishing into the driving rain. Hannah approached the stretcher, pulling on a fresh pair of nitrile gloves. She began her standard trauma assessment, her hands moving quickly over the man's bloody clothes. As she cut away the shredded remnants of his tactical vest, a piece of gear that immediately sent a cold spike of adrenaline through her veins, her scissors snagged on his left sleeve. She ripped the fabric away to check for entry wounds. There, branded into the thick, pale skin of his left forearm, was a tattoo. It was a jagged crown intertwined with a twin-headed serpent. Hannah stopped breathing. The sterile air of the hospital suddenly felt suffocating, thick like ash. Her vision tunneled. She knew that ink. Every operative who survived the brutal selection process of the Vanguard Initiative, a shadow black off-the-books medical retrieval and assassination unit, bore that mark. Her real name wasn't Hannah Mercer. It was Dr. Evelyn Reed. 5 years ago, she was Vanguard's chief trauma surgeon and biotoxin specialist, patching up monsters and burying the collateral damage. She had burned down a secure facility in Geneva, faked her own death in a fiery helicopter crash, and vanished into rural America to escape the nightmare. And now the nightmare was bleeding out on a stretcher in Mercy General. Hannah, don't just stand there staring at the ink. Put pressure on that wound. Beatrice's sharp voice shattered the trance. Hannah blinked rapidly, forcing the clinical mask back over her sheer terror. "Right, sorry," she mumbled, pressing a heavy stack of trauma pads into the man's ruined abdomen. Her mind raced at 1,000 miles an hour. If a Vanguard operative was here in Billings, Montana, it meant an operation had gone south locally. Or worse, it meant they were hunting her. She had to leave. Now. Every second she spent under these fluorescent lights increased the probability of a facial recognition hit by whoever was tracking this man. "Beatrice, I feel violently ill," Hannah lied, keeping her voice shaky. "I need to hit the restroom. Can you take over pressure?" Beatrice huffed, rolling her eyes. "Honestly, Mercer, a little blood and you go green. Fine, go, but don't take 10 minutes. Hannah practically sprinted away from Bay 4. She bypassed the staff restroom and headed straight for the locker room. She didn't bother changing out of her scrubs. She grabbed her duffel bag, a go bag she had kept meticulously packed with cash, 5 different passports, and a heavily encrypted satellite burner phone for half a decade. She threw her hospital ID badge into the trash can. "Goodbye, Hannah Mercer," she thought. As she reached for the rear exit door that led to the staff parking garage, the hospital lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then an eerie, heavy vibration began to rattle the thin drywall of the corridor. It started as a low, rhythmic thumping that vibrated through the soles of her cheap nursing shoes. Thwump! 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 Hannah froze her hand hovering over the exit bar. She recognized that acoustic signature instantly. It wasn't the lightweight, high-pitched whine of the local medevac chopper. It was the deep, bone-rattling displacement of a military-grade heavy-lift rotorcraft. Before she could push the door open, the hospital's PA system emitted a sharp squeal of feedback, then dead silence. The external communication lines had been jammed. The cell service bars on her personal phone dropped to no signal. They're here. Through the reinforced glass window of the exit door, Hannah saw the blinding glare of a massive spotlight sweep across the parking garage. A pitch-black Sikorsky UH-60 Blackhawk descended with terrifying speed, its downdraft snapping the branches off the decorative oak trees and setting off a symphony of car alarms. The helicopter didn't even bother finding a clear landing zone. It set down hard, right on top of a row of vehicles, the heavy landing gear instantly crushing the roof of Dr. Aris's prize silver Mercedes. The side doors of the Black Hawk slid open before the skids even stabilized. 12 men poured out. They were dressed in sterile matte black tactical gear. No police insignia. No military patches. Just advanced ceramic body armor, night vision mounts, and suppressed compact assault rifles. They moved with a terrifying synchronized fluidity that only came from years of operating in the world's most dangerous black zones. Hannah backed away from the door, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She was trapped. The rear exit was compromised. She turned and bolted back toward the ER, the only place with enough foot traffic and structural chaos to provide a temporary hiding spot. As she slid back into the main triage area, panic had already erupted. Doctors, nurses, and patients were staring out the large front windows in absolute horror as a second team of men in black breached the main entrance. The glass automatic doors didn't open fast enough. The lead man simply kicked them off their tracks. The ER fell deathly silent, save for the beeping of heart monitors. A man stepped through the shattered glass. Unlike the tactical team, he wasn't wearing a helmet. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal gray suit beneath a lightweight Kevlar vest. His face was sharp, aristocratic, and marked by a distinct jagged scar running from his left ear to his jawline. Hannah, crouching behind the supply carts in the trauma bay, felt the blood drain entirely from her face. It was Tobias Quinn, the director of Vanguard's Internal Reclamation Division. The man she had shot in the neck 5 years ago before leaping out of a burning building. "Ladies and gentlemen," Quinn's voice was a smooth, cultured baritone that carried effortlessly across the terrified room. It was the voice of a man completely accustomed to total control. "I apologize for the dramatic entrance. We are securing this facility under the authority of, well, let's just say an authority vastly above your pay grade." Dr. Aris, ever the arrogant fool, puffed out his chest and marched forward. "What the hell is the meaning of this? You can't just storm a hospital. I am calling the police immediately." The man standing next to Quinn didn't even aim his rifle. He simply stepped forward and struck Dr. Aris across the face with the heavy titanium stock of his weapon. Aris crumpled to the linoleum floor, out cold, before he even hit the ground. Several nurses screamed. Beatrice covered her mouth, backing against the wall in terror. "Please," Quinn said, gently stepping over Aris's unconscious body. "Let's not have any heroics. We aren't here for your drugs, and we certainly aren't here for your money. We are looking for an asset, a ghost." Quinn signaled his men. Two of them dragged the bloody unconscious Vanguard operative from the stretcher in the hallway and threw him at Quinn's feet. This man, Quinn gestured to the bleeding operative, was sent ahead to scout. He failed, obviously, but his biometrics tracked him to this exact location before his tracker went dark. That means the ghost is here. Quinn pulled a high-resolution tablet from his jacket. He tapped the screen, and the monitors across the ER normally used to display patient waiting times suddenly flickered and changed. A photograph appeared on every screen in the room. It was a picture of Dr. Evelyn Reed, her hair blonde, her face unlined, wearing a Vanguard uniform. Her name is Dr. Evelyn Reed. She is highly dangerous, Quinn announced, his cold eyes scanning the faces of the trembling staff. And I know she is hiding in this hospital. I am going to lock down the exits. If she does not surrender herself in the next 5 minutes, I will have my men start executing the medical staff, one by one, starting with the pediatrics ward. Behind the supply cart, Hannah squeezed her eyes shut. The quiet life was over. The invisible woman was dead. She reached into her duffel bag, her hand bypassing the cash and the passports, and wrapping firmly around the cold, textured grip of a suppressed 9mm pistol she had prayed she would never have to use again. The heavy silence in the emergency room was broken only by the synchronized metallic clicks of the tactical team checking their weapons. Behind the primary supply cart, Hannah Mercer, now fully submerged in the cold, calculated persona of Dr. Evelyn Reed, steadied her breathing. The trembling in her hands, a residual side effect of her 5-year masquerade, as a timid civilian vanished entirely. Her grip on the suppressed 9mm pistol was rock solid. 4 minutes, ladies and gentlemen. Tobias Quinn's voice echoed through the triage bay, carrying a terrifying nonchalance. I highly suggest anyone with a conscience start calling out for our dear Dr. Reed. The pediatrics wing is awfully quiet tonight. It would be a shame to disturb them. Evelyn knew Quinn wasn't bluffing. Vanguard Initiative operatives did not operate on empty threats. They operated on terrifying absolutes. If she didn't reveal herself, he would order a massacre. But surrendering meant he would extract the Geneva Protocols from her, the horrific synthetic nerve agent she had spent years designing and ultimately destroying her own life to bury. She couldn't let Vanguard have it. She couldn't let these innocent people die either. She needed to blind them, staying low. Evelyn crawled backward, using the reflection of the stainless steel trauma doors to monitor the positions of the 2 guards stationed near the hallway. They were 50 feet away, their attention focused on the terrified hospital staff huddled in the center of the room. Evelyn slipped past the curtain of Bay 6 and slid into the adjacent pharmaceutical storage corridor. She bypassed the heavy narcotics cabinet entirely. She needed something much faster and far more disruptive. Moving with absolute silence, her rubber-soled nursing shoes gliding over the linoleum, she reached the janitorial bulk supply closet. Inside, she rapidly unsealed 2 commercial-sized jugs, high concentration anhydrous ammonia, and industrial-grade hypochlorite bleach. As a biotoxin specialist, Evelyn knew that mixing them in an uncontrolled environment was practically a war crime. The resulting chloramine gas would cause severe respiratory distress blindness and panic. It was a crude, brutal tactic, but she had to level the playing field against night vision and body armor. She grabbed a plastic mop bucket, positioned it right beneath the main HVAC intake vent that fed the central triage bay, and poured both chemicals together. The reaction was instantaneous. A thick, acrid yellow-green vapor violently bubbled upward, getting sucked directly into the hospital's air circulation system. 3 minutes, Quinn announced over the PA system. Evelyn didn't wait. She bolted down the restricted staff corridor, heading for the basement access stairwell. As she rounded the corner, she nearly collided with a Vanguard mercenary. He was heavy-set, clad in level 4 ceramic plates, gripping a compact submachine gun. He raised his weapon, opening his mouth to shout a warning into his headset. Evelyn didn't break stride. With terrifying fluidity, she stepped inside his guard, violently slapping the barrel of his rifle upward. Before he could pull the trigger, she drove the palm of her left hand upward, shattering his nose, while her right hand brought the heavy grip of her 9mm crashing down against his temple. The man slumped unconscious before his knees hit the floor. Evelyn caught him by the tactical vest, lowering him silently. She swiftly stripped him of his encrypted comms earpiece, shoving it into her own ear, and relieved him of 3 flashbang grenades and a tactical combat knife. Over the earpiece, she heard a sudden eruption of coughing. "Boss, we have a situation in the main ER." A voice crackled over the radio, strained and gasping. "Air. The air is toxic. Visibility dropping. It's some kind of chemical agent." "Put on your rebreathers, you idiots!" Quinn snarled over the channel. "She's trying to smoke us out. Secure the hostages and lock down the stairwells." Evelyn smiled grimly. The distraction was working. She sprinted down the stairwell toward the basement, skipping 3 steps at a time. The basement housed the hospital's central oxygen supply, a massive, highly pressurized system that fed the entire building. If she could reach the manifold, she could rig a localized explosive charge that would blow the backup generators, plunging the entire hospital into absolute darkness and disabling the electronic maglocks on the exit doors. But as she reached the bottom landing, the heavy steel door swung open. 2 more mercenaries stepped through their weapons, sweeping the narrow stairwell. They spotted her instantly. Evelyn dove backward, rolling up the concrete stairs, just as a hail of suppressed gunfire chewed the drywall to shreds exactly where her head had been a fraction of a second before. "Contact basement stairwell north side," one of them shouted into his comms. Evelyn pulled a flashbang from her stolen belt, pulled the pin, and bounced it hard off the concrete wall. She covered her ears and shut her eyes tightly. Bang! The deafening concussion rocked the enclosed space. A blinding flash of magnesium light spilled up the stairs. Evelyn instantly vaulted over the railing, dropping 10 feet straight down onto the landing behind them. While they were still disoriented and blinded, she moved with surgical lethality. She fired 2 suppressed rounds into the unprotected gap beneath the first man's Kevlar helmet, dropping him instantly. She seamlessly transitioned to the second man, sweeping his legs out from under him and driving the pommel of her combat knife into the nerve cluster at the base of his neck. He went limp. Evelyn stood panting, the adrenaline burning like battery acid in her veins. She checked her watch. Quinn's deadline was up. He would be moving on the pediatrics ward now. She had to accelerate her timeline. She breached the basement door and sprinted toward the main boiler room. She needed to turn Mercy General Hospital into a fortress and Tobias Quinn into a victim. The quiet nurse was gone forever. The apex predator of the Vanguard Initiative had finally come home. The basement of Mercy General was a labyrinth of exposed pipes, hissing steam valves, and the low mechanical groaning of the hospital's massive backup generators. Evelyn moved through the shadows with the ease of a phantom. Over the stolen earpiece, she could hear the chaotic chatter of Quinn's men attempting to coordinate through the lingering chloramine gas upstairs. Sweep the east wing. The hostages are secured in the cafeteria, but we've lost contact with Alpha Team in the basement, a voice barked over the comms. Leave the hostages, Quinn's voice cut through chillingly calm. She's in the sublevels. She's trying to disable the grid. Converge on the main utility hub. Bring her to me alive, but I don't care if she's missing limbs. Evelyn reached the central oxygen manifold, a towering array of steel cylinders and thick braided hoses. She didn't have C4, but she had the intimate knowledge of chemical pressure thresholds. She grabbed a heavy wrench and began violently torquing the primary regulator valves, overriding the safety releases. The deafening hiss of highly pressurized pure oxygen flooded the confined room. She retreated to the reinforced doorway of the electrical relay room 30 yards down the corridor. She took out her suppressed 9mm, aimed carefully at the industrial spark gap transformer mounted on the wall near the oxygen tanks, and waited. Less than a minute later, the heavy steel doors at the far end of the basement corridor kicked open. Tactical flashlights pierced the gloom. 4 men advanced in a diamond formation, their laser sights cutting through the damp air. Behind them, walking with a steady, arrogant stride, was Tobias Quinn. "Evelyn," Quinn called out, his voice echoing off the concrete. "I know you can hear me. You're trapped. The local authorities have been completely jammed out. Nobody is coming to save your little friends upstairs. Hand over the decryption key for the Geneva files, and I'll walk away. You can go back to emptying bedpans for minimum wage." Evelyn didn't answer. She tracked the lead mercenary through the sights of her pistol. They were getting closer. 20 yards. 15. "You always were too sentimental," Quinn sneered, stepping into the edge of the flashlight beams. "That was your flaw. You cared about the collateral damage. That's why you burned down the lab. But you didn't destroy the data, did you? You hid it. You're right about one thing, Tobias." Evelyn's voice rang out from the darkness, cold and hard. Quinn stopped, his eyes snapping toward the sound. The mercenaries instantly trained their rifles on the electrical room doorway. "I am sentimental," Evelyn continued, stepping out from cover just enough to be seen. "Which is why I'm going to bury you in the same place you tried to bury me." "Fire!" Quinn screamed. Evelyn ducked back behind the thick concrete wall as a storm of bullets chipped away at the doorframe. She didn't shoot at the men. She aimed her pistol through a small gap in the industrial piping, pointing directly at the spark gap transformer she had targeted earlier. She pulled the trigger. The bullet shattered the heavy ceramic casing of the transformer. A shower of brilliant blue electrical sparks rained down into the invisible cloud of highly pressurized pure oxygen pooling in the center of the room. The explosion was catastrophic. A shockwave of concussive force and searing orange flame tore through the basement corridor. The heavy steel blast doors buckled inward. The 4 mercenaries caught dead center in the ignition zone were violently thrown backward, their armor unable to protect them from the sheer kinetic impact of the blast wave. The hospital's structural pillars groaned in protest as the backup generators were instantly vaporized in the fireball. Every light in Mercy General Hospital simultaneously shattered. The building plunged into pitch blackness. Evelyn, protected by the reinforced walls of the electrical room, felt the air sucked from her lungs by the pressure differential. Her ears rang with a high-pitched whine. She forced herself up, drawing the combat knife she had taken from the guard. The element of surprise was over. Now it was just the brutal math of survival. She stepped out into the smoke-filled corridor. The emergency red strobe lights kicked on, painting the basement in a hellish, flickering glow. The mercenaries were down, scattered like broken dolls among the debris. But a figure was moving in the smoke. Tobias Quinn staggered to his feet, his tailored suit scorched and shredded. Half of his face was covered in blood from a deep laceration across his forehead. He coughed violently, raising his sidearm blindly into the smoke. Evelyn didn't give him a chance to acquire a target. She sprinted through the smoke, moving faster than humanly possible. Quinn fired wildly, the muzzle flashes illuminating his terrified eyes, but the shots went wide. Evelyn slid under his firing line, driving her shoulder hard into his shattered ribs. Quinn gasped in agony, dropping his weapon as he collapsed against a ruptured steam pipe. Before he could recover, Evelyn was on him. She pinned him to the scalding metal, the cold steel of her combat knife pressed firmly against the jagged scar on his neck, the same scar she had given him 5 years ago. "You—" Quinn choked out, blood bubbling at the corner of his mouth. "You can't hide. The initiative will never stop hunting you." "Let them come," Evelyn whispered, her voice devoid of any emotion. "But tell the board something for me. Tell them the quiet nurse died tonight. Tell them the surgeon is back." Instead of slitting his throat, Evelyn reversed her grip and drove the heavy pommel of the knife with devastating force into his temple. Quinn's eyes rolled back, and he slumped heavily to the floor, unconscious and broken. She wouldn't kill him. A dead man couldn't deliver a message. Above them, the distinct wailing sirens of the Billings Police Department and local SWAT teams finally pierced the night air. The communications jammer must have been destroyed in the blast. Evelyn wiped the blood from her face. She picked up her duffel bag from where she had stashed it in the electrical room. She walked past the moaning mercenaries, ascending the rear service stairs that led directly to the loading docks. By the time the heavily armed SWAT teams breached the emergency room, finding the hospital staff terrified but unharmed, and discovering the unconscious bodies of the world's most elite shadow operatives scattered throughout the building, the mysterious nurse was already gone. Beatrice Miller, wrapped in a shock blanket, stared blankly at the shattered glass of the ER entrance. When the police captain asked her who had saved them, Beatrice could only shake her head in stunned disbelief. "It was Hannah," she whispered, looking out into the rain-swept darkness. "Just Hannah." Far away, driving a stolen black SUV down a desolate stretch of highway, Dr. Evelyn Reed watched the sun begin to rise over the Montana mountains. She reached into her bag, pulled out a new passport, and tossed the encrypted burner phone out the window. It was time to find a new hospital. It was time to be invisible again. If this heart-pounding medical thriller kept you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button, share this video with your friends to see if they could survive the Vanguard Initiative, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more intense real-life action stories. Hidden identities and epic twists delivered straight to your feed every single week.